Welcome to Experiments in Leadership. I am Sonu Bhasin, and Experiments in Leadership is a place where industry leaders talk about various facets of leadership. But before I introduce my guest today, let me urge all of you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's good content at no cost to you. Great deal, wouldn't you say? But I think my guest today can help me create a better tagline, because my guest today is a person behind some of the most iconic brand campaigns since the 90s. Sanjeev Bhargava's dream while we were at MBA was to join Lintas and become an ad man. His dream did come true, and then he spent almost 3 decades creating dreams for his clients. Some campaigns that come to mind very quickly are Why Should Boys Have All the Fun? Sadhu, and also Mabeka Magic Chalega Kya, and more recently, the Lost Boats campaign that ran in the Times of India. Now, after Lintas, Sanjeev spent time with HTA, then with ULKA, and then came back to HTA, which was then JWT. After quitting the advertising world, he went on to lead the business of Times of India. And currently, he's a man much in demand as a business consultant. So welcome to Experiments in Leadership, Sanjeev, and looking forward to the conversation with you. And viewers, if we move beyond our 20 minutes, it's only because Sanjeev will have many stories to tell. So let's start. So let me just start with Sadhu, which is like something that you tell people and people can actually reel off, H for Hitler, etc., etc. How did that come about?
Actually, it was very simple. There was, the obvious insight that people worked on for a job site was that people wanted to change jobs for better content and job content and better salary, etc. But when we probe deeper, actually the real reason why people quit jobs, and that was an emotional reason, was that they didn't have a good boss. So, and this is something to do with leadership, actually, because if you don't have good leadership, you can never be happy in your job, no matter how much money you get. So what we did was, instead of taking the beaten path of better jobs and better job content, etc., we decided to pick this insight of a bad boss and saying, if you have a bad boss, well, it's time for you to change, because we wanted to motivate people to apply or put their resumes on Naukri.com. And that is why we created this evil boss called Sadhu. And then what happens to people who have applied at Naukri.com? They get created and they can give it back to Sadhu.
Yeah. And, the reason I started with Sadhu campaign is, like you rightly said, it was about a leader. Now, it was about a leader who was not liked by his people. But, because you've spent years in the advertising industry and then with the TOI, you must have met scores of leaders. And you would have seen good leadership, you would have seen bad leadership. So, which are some of the leaders or leadership styles that stand out for you before we come to your own experiments that worked?
So, I recently had a conversation with a gentleman called Mr. Ravikant, who was chairman of Tata. And he was talking about leading from the back, leading from the front. And it was a very interesting conversation, because he was a leader who was phenomenal, actually. I mean, I worked very closely with him in his early years, and he was inspirational. He was a thought leader, but then he would let, the people who reported to him to take charge of a vision that he gave to them. And it was an absolutely inspiring experience to work with a person like that, because you believed in that vision, because he articulated that vision well for you. He charged you up with that vision, and then he said, now you go ahead and make it a reality. So that was one leadership style that I was, in my early years, I felt was very, very good. It worked for us. There's a second leadership style that came, I encountered with a gentleman called Ashok Bhasin.
Who was Ashok Bhasin? Now, Ravikant, okay, for people who didn't know, Ravikant was, I know him because he was part of Titan, but, you may have known him when he was besides Titan. Wasn't he managing a scooter company?
Yes, he was.
And then a pressure cooker company?
Yes, he was.
And then a watch company? I mean, that speaks of his leadership style.
And Philips, and then he was.
And Philips. Yeah.
And finally, of course, he went to the place where he did wonders, which was Tata Motors.
Yeah.
But yeah, I encountered him during his LML days, which was a really beleaguered company, and how he brought it out of that single-handedly.
Yeah.
That was Ravikant. And then there was Ashok Bhasin. Ashok Bhasin came from Reckitt's to Whirlpool. And now he was a person who just was uncompromising. I have never seen a more uncompromising person in my life.
Yeah.
What he did was, and it was unpleasant at times, but what he did was he just taught everyone who worked with him, and I was the agency for him, that compromise is evil.
Compromise is evil.
And you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing till you got the best out of his people, all his people. Yeah. And that was remarkable, because ultimately, while we bled and we cursed and we did all of that, all of us celebrated the successes that came out of that uncompromising attitude. And, so therefore, leadership also is about chasing that one dream that the leader believes, and he makes everybody else believe that dream. And that is the magic of leadership, honestly speaking. So, these were two very interesting personalities that I came across who did things in a very different way, both of them. Yeah. But they did bring a dream alive, and they made the dream come alive for the entire team. And that's how it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. So now let's come straight to the experiments that you may have done in your work life. So talk about an experiment in leadership that worked for you.
Okay. So actually, all my experiments revolved around some basic tenets. The one basic one was, so let me talk about the principle of it. The principle is that look for the good in people. Their weaknesses are of no use to you.
Look for the good in people. The weaknesses are of no use to you. Good statement.
The second was delegate, but do not abdicate. Now, when you look at a combination of these two, when you apply these two, the first one is a principle, the second one is a functional attribute of leadership. So you use the first one, which is search for the good in people, not their weaknesses. What happens is, when you do that, when you focus on that, you're able to bring the best out of people. You also tend to inject people with self-confidence. You tend to motivate them, and you tend to make them, therefore, get more committed and work harder at whatever the common objective is. So at a universal level, I believe that this works. So that was the first tenet that I have always followed in every situation of my life. And the second one is delegation without abdication. Now, what happens is leadership necessarily comes from the functionality of delegation. Otherwise, what's a leader doing? But you do not abdicate. Because if you abdicate, then what you're doing is, a poor leader abdicates completely, which means that he says, I've given the job and now it's their job to do it.
Yeah.
A lot of times people need guidance. And sometimes people need handholding, and sometimes people need support, and sometimes people need correction, and sometimes they even need reprimand.
Yeah.
You cannot abdicate. At the same time, if you do not delegate as much as you should, and therefore you do not abdicate as much, and you keep things, then you become a bit of a control freak. And what happens is you get a demotivated team. You get a team which is less empowered. You also tend to reduce your own circle of influence, because you are getting into the thick of things, etc. So therefore, a balance between delegation and abdication is what matters. So when you talk about success of leadership, success is not just about productivity, because productivity can be achieved in many ways. It is also about a team that shares a vision, a team that works well together, a team that enjoys coming into work, and a team that therefore adds more to the environment and to the job than what their brief is.
Right.
So that is what I call success. Otherwise, productivity, a lot of people can do. So a holistic thing of productivity plus all of these things is what I call success. And therefore, in the context of that, when I talk about my experiments, and I'll talk about my first experiment in leadership when I was reasonably young, and I was asked to head the Calcutta office of ULKA. And I landed there and realized that the team was absolutely a greenhorn team. They really did not have experience. They did not understand advertising so much. It was a young team. It was a small office. It was a loss-making office at that time. You couldn't afford better people.
And you yourself were in your 20s at that time.
No, I was in my 30s, early 30s, very early 30s. But the fact is that it was a brand new job for me. I was in a new city in a position which was a leadership position. It was a business head position. And I was tasked with turning around a company with absolutely no competencies available to me.
Yeah.
Now there, the first thing, which is look for the strengths in people and not the weaknesses, I realized that people were eager to learn.
Right. Right.
They may not have the capabilities, but they had the eagerness to learn whatever they could. So that was what I picked out. And there were, out of the 30-member team, there were 7 or 8 people who were like that. And I decided this is going to be my core team. The second thing was this whole business of delegation versus application. Now, there was no way I could do any delegation there, actually.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, that was a place where I did zero delegation.
Mm-hmm.
The fact was that it was a small team. It worked like that at that point in time. And I realized that I'm not delegating. So it was about educating them, which was because they were eager to learn. So these things happened hand in hand. There was this education going on. So I used to actually, after 7 o'clock in the evening, when the business of the office was over, I would sit from 7 to 10 with these 7 or 8 people and actually teach them.
And if I can interrupt, that itself, besides you spending time, the fact that you were doing it in Calcutta, where they take their leisure time very seriously, would have been really something. Yeah, so they take their leisure very seriously.
They do. And well, there's an entire story around it, actually, because they were not initially like that. So there was a lot of mess and there were a lot of financial issues that I had to sort out, which was historical in nature. So I used to sit after 7 o'clock and going through all the historical files to understand the issues, etc. And they had never seen somebody working after 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So, the one guy got a little intrigued. He used to come in to say at 5:30 sharp, he would say, okay, sir, I'm going back home. And then all of them would come one by one into my room to say bye and go. This guy on that particular day came in at 5:30 and he said, excuse me, sir, the chaprasi tells me that you are here till 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
What do you do? So I said, you really want to know? He said, yeah. I said, then sit down. So he was the first recruit. When he sat down, the others got inquisitive of what is Tarun doing sitting in the boss's office till 10 o'clock. So slowly this gang of 7 who were the inquisitive lot, they came in and they started. So that's how it started. So,
yeah.
So it's not as if it happened automatically or I dictated it. They actually volunteered and it just became a club and, we used to have dinner together and we used to, then maybe even sometimes used to go out for late night shows and all that. So it just became a very, very lovely group of people who were eager to learn, who were eager to do things. And so initially there was no control, there was absolutely total control because I was doing everything. And then as these people became, a slightly more adept, they started taking up responsibilities, actually asking for responsibility. And that's how we were able to do a 300% growth across the 3 years that I was. So that was my first real experimental leadership, which I felt worked remarkably well. The people are lifelong friends. They have all done very well for themselves in life. So, it's just very rewarding to know that you were instrumental in making something happen. So that was really the first experiment. Now, when you look at the reverse of that, which is my second stint at JWT, when I landed up in that place, I had a sea of people. There were 300 people there. But the problem was that there was a lot of politics. There was a lot of bad blood between the teams. There was suspicion. There was insecurity and so on and so forth, because that's the way the organization had been run in the past. And they all looked at me with suspicion. I came from a smaller organization to a larger organization. And, they all felt that why is he being imposed on top of us, etc. So there was a lot of resistance as well. Now, the mistake I made there was that I delegated 100% because I believe that these are competent people. They have run large businesses and so on and so forth. And in a manner of speaking, I even abdicated to a very large extent because I felt that, I should only get report from them, but how they run their own businesses is their problem. They should be able to do that well because they are all very senior people. I was wrong.
Yeah.
Because it was not about functionality. At that point in time, they required leadership to bring them together. They needed leadership which actually exercised a firm hand in quelling interdepartmental rivalries and so on and so forth. They needed that kind of leadership. And then, they needed somebody to say, hey, I'm here to support you, but also to correct you. And I did not do that in the initial year and a half. And that is one of the reasons why my first 1.5 years was not very successful.
Right.
I learned very quickly. And that's, when you reverse that entire thing and you start becoming that assertive leader and you start saying that I will delegate, but I will not abdicate. And I will make sure that you guys are doing the right things in the right way, etc. That thing started working and the wheel started. Balance between delegation and has to come from just looking at the strengths of people, working on them, and making them.
Yeah.
Reverse examples of how success and failure.
Yeah. No, I think these are very interesting examples that you talked about. And these are not, like you said, it's not about productivity, because when you have good leadership, I think good productivity is a byproduct, because ultimately it's all about people. It's all about how you deal with them. It's about how do you empower them. But one question that comes to my mind when you talked about your stint at JWT is that you went in from a smaller agency to a much larger agency. You had these wonderful set of people who were very capable. As a leader, did you feel hesitancy in telling them what to do because you thought that, was that because of your own view of yourself? Because many leaders do find this, when they go from a smaller to a larger business, when they go from an unrelated business to a new business, they somehow feel a little, stupid, So was it about you?
Sonu, can we just...
Many leaders do find themselves surrounded by very capable people, and the hesitancy is, inko to itna sab kuch aata hai, main kya bataunga?
No, so actually it was slightly different. The thing was that I sensed a lot of insecurity in the people. And it pre-existed my entry. And I then became an additional insecurity for all of them. So it was very important for me to get rid of that insecurity. And I felt at that time, erroneously so, that it would come from me giving them a free rein to do on their business what they felt that they should do.
Right.
That was the error of judgment. The error of judgment is nowhere and in no circumstances when there are disparate teams who have to work with each other to produce something, can they work properly unless the leader guides that process.
Right.
Because there is not, the leader becomes the main link between the departments. And if that doesn't happen, it's not going to work. You can't leave it to them. They are incapable of being able to settle those issues, no matter how this thing they are. So in the attempt to empower them, I actually disempowered them.
Right.
And that was a mistake. And the day I realized that this is what's happening, and I decided that I'm going to switch gears, things happened so fast and so nicely and so well, so quickly, that it was a one.
Yeah, no, I think this is very, very powerful, concepts that you have talked about, because ultimately every business is only about people. And as we started the conversation by Hari, Sadhu, you have bad bosses, and then you have good bosses who make you reject any other offer that may come your way. So yes, it is all about people. And the experiments around people get even more difficult because every individual is different. But fascinating speaking with you, Sanjeev, and pleasure as always. And thank you for your time. And viewers, there'll be more conversations, and watch this space for more. And yes, Bhargav, you have to create a tagline for my channel so that more and more people can subscribe to it.
I'll do that. And incidentally, I have some theories on leadership which are distinct from what I've spoken about here.
Yeah.
And I think that a tagline will come from there.
Oh,
But
great.
I also believe that leadership was not invented by human beings. We inherited it from the animal kingdom. And so I've read a lot about that. And the fact is that since time immemorial, actually, living beings are incapable of surviving without leadership. Leadership is a survival concept, and it is present in all living beings, whether it is pride of lions or it is, a
gaggle of geese.
Gaggle of geese. There will always be there.
So that is a topic for another discussion, which I promise we will have again. Yeah. So thank you and bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.